This is what the cruise line industry promises: fun and excitement, living in the lap of luxury, visiting exotic destinations, and all in a safe and secure environment. And the cruise lines also like to market something else: family. This is the kind of vacation, we're told, where your kids are safe. But what if that wasn't always what happened on cruise ships? What if there was a dark underside to this sparkling industry? An underside in which women are more likely to be sexually harassed and assaulted here than they are in Canada, on which Canadians are among the least protected passengers on board, one in which some crew members were more sexual predator than professional. Sound impossible? Just talk to Marilyn and Jamie Decker of Monterey, California. Their story began 8 years ago. Jamie had just turned 12. Her parents promised her a trip around the Caribbean on a Carnival cruise ship.
It's something I'd heard about from the time I was little, and the big boat trip, and I was very, very excited about the cruise. Very excited.
For Jamie, this trip had all the promise of being a dream vacation. And of course, for Marilyn, there was an added bonus.
I was very comfortable with it because that's part of their advertising gimmick, really, is they tell the moms and dads, you know, don't worry, we'll take care of your kids.
I even actually remember wanting to stay out and having a justifiable argument about why it would be okay for me to stay out later on a ship, because where can you go on a ship?
At first, the cruise was everything it was advertised to be. Jamie spent most of her time with the ship's teen club around the pool.
And you're in kind of a wonderland. I mean, it's beautiful and lights, and there's so many things to do. I mean, you really are lulled into a feeling of complacency. I mean, you really do feel safe. You do. You feel safe.
But on the 5th day of the cruise, all that changed.
My whole world changed that day. Felt really like the cruise itself was going to be a life-changing experience. Just turned out not to be what I thought, the kind of experience I thought it was going to be.
The ship was in port. Jamie stayed on board with her friends. After spending time in the pool, she went back to her room to have a shower. There was nothing unusual until she got onto an elevator with a member of the ship's crew who oddly seemed to know a lot about her.
He knew things about me that not even, I mean, unless you intimately knew me well as a person, he knew my dog's name. He knew things about me that just way off. There's no reason to know.
He told Jamie that if she would meet him down the hall, he could take her up to the bow of the ship and show her where the crew watched dolphins.
I walked to where the room was. I looked around, and it just was obviously not a passenger area. I knew it wasn't supposed to be there. I knew I was going to get in trouble. So I decided to leave. He turned around and he goes, "Come on, don't you want to see the dolphins? Let's go see the dolphins."
The crew member led her through some restricted areas and eventually right to a machine room below the front of the ship.
This is when I realized that something was wrong, that I needed to get out of there as soon as possible. I said, "Oh, my dad's looking for me. We're going to go snorkeling." I kept trying to tell him that my dad was looking for me.
Jamie says the crew member laughed at her and then blocked the only door out.
He ripped my dress off and threw me up against this metal thing and was laughing and telling me, you know, Dad isn't coming for me, and he laid my dress down. And he just, at this point, he raped me at this point and left me there. I laid there for a very long time. I laid there. Before he leaves, he threatens me and tells me that if I tell anybody or if I make a big deal about this, he's gonna kill my family. He laughed at me and left the door open. It was a joke to him. He knew he was getting away with it.
Dazed and terrified, Jamie staggered back to her room, unsure of what to do. Ultimately, in order to protect the lives of her family, she decided to cover it up. She rejoined the teen group, but almost immediately broke down and became hysterical. The camp counselor wanted to know what was going on.
She knew something was wrong, so I had to tell her something. And I told her that a crew member had taken me to the front of the boat and had hugged me and touched me inappropriately and scared me. And that was it.
Jamie was questioned by a ship's officer. She says the tone was confrontational from the start.
At this point, I'm crying, I'm a little girl, and they have these big, scary guys asking me a bunch of questions. At this point, I have no idea where my camp counselor is. I'm asking for my parents.
She's absolutely correct. Surrounded by all these men. She's this tiny little girl crying, and that's when we walked in. And then, you know, I made a stupid comment about, oh, I'm so glad he didn't rape you. You know, stupid, but at the time, that's what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear my child was okay.
After the ship arrived back in port, Jamie stuck to her story. The crew member had only scared her. She held on to her secret for years.
It's like I had to start over. I had to become a different person. She took everything. Everything. My personality, my dreams, my goals, my innocence. He took everything. I no longer had an original thought. I no longer smiled. I hated everything. Nobody knew.
3 years after the rape, Jamie, now 15 years old, finally told a friend what had happened. The friend told Jamie's mother, and the secret was out. That night.
She asked me straightforward if what had happened on the cruise ship is all that had happened, and if I had been raped. And those were the most intense few minutes, I swear, thinking about what I was going to tell her, how I could tell her. I seriously considered not telling her, saying no. I started crying. I said yes. I was.
Behaviors had been so different from who she really is. You know, nightmares, eating disorder, drinking, smoking, rage, crying. I mean, all this stuff had been going on for about 3 years. You'd think we would have been able to recognize trauma.
What they did recognize was that her assailant could not be allowed to get away with it. And so the Deckers decided to call in the FBI. Well, the FBI investigated, but it reported back to the Deckers that there really wasn't anything that it could do. Not surprising, really, because when it comes to solving crimes on the high seas, the FBI hasn't had a lot of success. Any wonder, then, that the Deckers decided to take matters into their own hands, and they sued Carnival Cruise Lines. And this is where Jamie believes she was victimized a second time, this time by the Carnival Cruise Lines. Negotiations began. An offer or two was floated across the table, and then one final offer, almost in the form of a threat.
Our attorney told us that the opposing attorney had told him that if we didn't take this last offer, that they would send a team of attorneys to the little town we were living in California. They would get a yearbook, and they would start interviewing every student in the yearbook to try to dig up any dirt on her or on us as a family.
Just wanting the horror to end, the Deckers took the offer. But on their way out, Marilyn had some parting words for the cruise ship's lawyers.
The whole premise was that she made it all up. That's what he kept, over and over, that she just made this, wild imagination. And I said, I just want to assure you that this event certainly did happen. And he kind of laughed and he said, Mrs. Decker, do you think we'd pay you this much money if it hadn't happened? Quote, unquote.
Jamie is now nearly 20 years old. After years of anger and pain, she's finally moving on with her life. But she says she'll never forget her experience on board the cruise ship. They told her it would be fun. They told her she would be safe.
He was a uniformed officer in my eyes. There's no reason not to. They say go to him if there's trouble. If there was trouble, I would go look for him. If there was a stranger telling me, come with me, he's the one in the uniform, I would go and say there's a stranger coming trying to take me. And it turns out that the guy in the uniform is the one who did the deed.
So was Jamie Decker's experience just one hideous incident in the cruise industry? Well, that depends on who you talk to. Cruise lines maintain that they are one of the safest ways that anyone, particularly families, can travel. Others say it's an industry with a problem that they just won't admit. So what's the real story? Just how predatory are members of the crew? To find out, W5 decided to go on a cruise on the Royal Caribbean ship, the Majesty of the Seas. We We sent one female producer, someone who fit the target profile, and a second one to capture anything that happened on tape. And just like the advertisement claims, there's a party going on from the moment we get on board. The band is playing, the drinks are flowing, and everyone is having a lot of fun. Service seems courteous and attentive, but not overly familiar. So far, so good. But we haven't even cleared the port of Miami. Day 2. We've now placed our producer by the pool. She sits in a deck chair reading a book. Within a few minutes, a waiter comes up and starts to talk. She orders a drink and he brings it. But that's not the end of this approach. Our waiter keeps coming back. Again, and again, and again, and again. At one point, although the pool area is crowded and the other waiters are busy, he stands and talks with our producer for more than 20 minutes. And when our producer is talking to other women, he circles around, waiting for a chance to reapproach. He ends the afternoon by asking her if she'd like to join him at the nightclub that evening. Now that invitation is a clear violation of Royal Caribbean's policy that prohibits relationships between passengers and crew. But it gets a lot worse than just violating company policy. Just ask this man. Jim Walker is a Miami-based attorney who specializes in sexual assault cases filed by cruise ship passengers.
They have a problem, they know they have a problem, they're covering up the problem, they don't give an inch.
What Walker says they're covering up is a dirty little secret that's not so little.
What we've seen in what has been revealed in the court cases is that there are numerous crimes that occur, and actually you're more likely to be a victim of a sexual assault on a cruise ship than ashore.
To put a number on it, according to testimony in the U.S. Congress, you are 50% more likely to be sexually assaulted on board a cruise ship as you are on dry land. And here's something else to consider. In a majority of the cases of sexual assault on the high seas, the attackers have been members of the ship's crew. Those are astonishing numbers. Does the cruise industry admit those numbers to you?
They say that crime simply doesn't occur. It's extremely rare. Come on aboard. And if anything happens, we have protocols and we have procedures and we'll follow them and you'll be safe.
But the industry knows that sexual assault is not a rare occurrence. And here's the proof. These confidential reports obtained by W5 were commissioned in 1999 by Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines. Experts conducted studies on the problem of crew sexually assaulting passengers. One report concluded, improper activity occurs frequently aboard ships, but goes unreported and/or unpunished. The second report also found crew members generally understand that if they commit an offense and are caught, they are most likely going to lose their job and be returned home, but not spend time in jail. So what's been the industry's reaction? Well, for the most part, they've spent a lot of time and effort to downplay the issue. In March 2006, Royal Caribbean told the U.S. Congress that over a 3-year period, only 66 sexual assaults were reported in their fleet.
This was the information that they provided Congress that they were proud of. The fact of the matter is the actual crime rate was several times what they revealed to Congress.
And Jim Walker set out to prove that. He went to court for an order to force Royal Caribbean to turn over their actual incident reports.
And we finally found a judge that would really take some action, and he ordered Royal Caribbean to provide the total number of sexual assaults in their fleet for a 3-year period of time. And we found that number to be several hundred incidences, which is far more than they've ever revealed in any other case.
And in fact, what these documents reveal was that during the same period, Royal Caribbean had more than 250 reported sexual incidents, almost half of which were sexual assaults. Meanwhile, back on the ship, remember the waiter who invited our producer on a date? It's time for the rendezvous, all being taped by W5's camera. But before she can even meet him, a different waiter, one who works at the nightclub, takes her drink order and then hangs around to hit on her. He's not even pretending to be discreet. You can't hear what he's saying because of the pounding music, but he's asking our producer if she would like to go somewhere quiet and have sex. She repeatedly asks him, "Won't you get fired for having relations with a guest?" He dismisses the suggestion time and time again, merely saying, "There are places to go." Our producer declines the invitation, but remember, he's taken her drink order, and that means that he has seen her room key, because it's also used as a credit card on board. So he knows her cabin number. And on a cruise ship, that can sometimes be very dangerous.
Have a list that comes out.
At least according to Randall Jakes.
50, 60, 100.
He's an ex-Miami cop and worked for years for several cruise lines as a security officer. He says that for sexual predators on board ship, that sort of information is power. Jakes has seen crew using room numbers to hunt women down, not only alone, but in packs.
There is an active, organized stalking, if you want to call it that, or targeting, as I call it, of females that come aboard cruise ships. It starts from the first day and it doesn't stop till the voyage is ended at the end of the week.
So they would know at all times what that woman is doing. Is she going for a drink? Is she
exactly.
having... So they can track her all over the
I
ship.
can follow you and your family all over the ship by what you do and how many times. Every time you swipe that card, I can track you.
Organized groups trading information about potential victims. That's what Jakes is talking about. And he says it goes on all the time. In fact, remember Jamie Decker? One of the first things she recalled was that her attacker knew so much about her.
He knew things about me that just way off. There's no reason to know.
Other victims have reported similar experiences. Crew knowing their names, what cabins they were in, who they were traveling with, and what they had done every day of the cruise. Waiting, some say, for the right moment to strike. So what could possibly drive crew members to commit this crime? Some point to the working conditions. These men stay on board for 6 months at a time, they work 60 hours a week, and they're isolated from wives and girlfriends. Others cite cultural differences.
Their idea of interacting with a female guest is perceived as they're being invited to have sex with them just because they're engaged in a conversation.
And remember, the consequences for being caught, according to internal industry documents, are virtually non-existent. Add all that up, and you've got a perfect environment for everything from consensual sex to assault. And perhaps a much more insidious problem, at least according to Randall Jakes. Sexual predators coming back for more.
I was working with Disney Cruise Line, and my first day of my first contract, one of my security guards that was fired for sexual harassment 10 years before was standing in front of me as a waiter. And he didn't recognize me.
What did you think?
My mouth pretty much dropped down, and I realized that the system is as bad as everybody says it is.
Day 4, and the end of the W5 cruise. We've dealt with constant attention from crew members and at least one incident of sexual harassment. An indication that despite industry policy, some crew members have a casual attitude towards sex with passengers, an atmosphere that can lead to a playground for predators. For years, it's been smooth sailing for the cruise industry. More passengers, new ships, growing by more than $1 billion a year. And despite a few problems, they've managed to maintain an impeccable reputation. But the sun may be setting on those calm waters. Victims of cruise ship crime are starting to get organized, and they are fighting back, making a very public issue of cruise ship crime. And a large part of that started right here on this pleasant street in Sacramento, California. That's where Lorie Dishman and her family live. Her crusade against the cruise lines all began in 2006, when Laurie and her best friend Michelle decided to go on a cruise. So you and your friend of 30 years have decided to take a cruise, and what did you expect was going to happen during those 7 days?
relaxing, dancing, having umbrella drinks, talking about the 30 years we've been friends, just enjoying the time away from the normal life, you know.
The first day was everything they had expected: fun, sun, and relaxation. But on the second night, when Laurie and Michelle went to the ship's nightclub, they were confronted by a couple of security guards. They demanded ID, and then they left, at least until later.
And then it was when I went to go request a song, and I had walked up the ramp, and as I turned the corner, this same man was standing there waiting for me, and he grabbed my wrist and leaned into my ear and said he wanted to come to my room.
Upset, Laurie went back to her cabin and went to bed. Michelle went to talk to some other friends.
And I was sound asleep, and then I remember waking up and the phone had rung. And as the phone rang, I answered it with the same voice, asking if I made it to my room and if I was alone.
This is the same voice of the person who grabbed you?
My wrist, yes. And as who is this? And they hung up the phone. I went back to bed.
Moments after the phone call,
I remember hearing the slight knock at the door. I got up, and as I opened it, I saw light, and then he forced his way into the room.
He then came in the room and the assault took place?
Yes, yes. And the next thing I remember is trying to get away and wanting him to stop, and then waking up the next morning wanting to know why I had gone to sleep with no pants on.
Laurie vividly remembers the aftermath of that sexual assault. Astonishingly, things got even worse. Laurie believes she was victimized a second time after they called the ship's authorities to report the crime.
I remember sitting there and couldn't stop crying. And Michelle told the best that she could before what had happened and to try to help, and they just sat there, and as we talked to them, the purser stood up and told me that it sounds as if you need to control your drinking.
Wait a minute. He's sitting on the bed where the crime occurred, and he says to you, you've got to control your drinking.
Yeah. And at that point, I just put my head in my knees and I just wouldn't look up again. I couldn't believe they didn't even hear what I was trying to tell them.
After what Laurie describes as caustic questioning, Michelle took her to see the ship's doctor.
Had anybody done anything to secure the room or to start collecting evidence in the room?
They gave us 2 gray garbage bags and sent us back to the room to gather any evidence, whether it be clothing, sheets, pillows.
They told you to collect your own evidence?
Right.
Laurie got off the ship at the next port of call and flew home. She also reported the crime to the FBI. Within weeks, Laurie was stunned to be told that U.S. authorities didn't think there was enough evidence for charges.
I went to Los Angeles because I wanted to know why is there not enough evidence. I had ligature marks on my neck. I had blood drawn, DNA, an impacted tampon. I had several items of I resisted, and they still sat across the table and told me there's not enough evidence. Continue this with your congresswoman or pursuing it civilly.
Pursue it civilly.
That's what the Department of Justice told me.
But Laurie didn't want money. She wanted justice. And eventually she met someone who could help her. Ken Carver, the president of the International Cruise Victims Association. 3 years ago, his daughter Miriam went missing. He discovered that her last credit card transaction was the purchase of a ticket on a cruise ship.
When you said to the cruise line company, my daughter was on your ship and she's missing, can you help me? What did they say?
Well, they said, okay, we're here to help you, but in fact, they were lying to us.
Carver didn't want much, just to speak with the steward who had cleaned his daughter's room.
You're saying that it took you 4 months and $75,000 before you even had the right to talk to somebody who may have seen your daughter?
We had to hire a law firm in Miami. It was like a waterfall of money going out. we finally deposed the steward and found out that he had reported our daughter missing for 5 days on that ship to his supervisor. And his supervisor said, hey, just go do your job, forget it.
Ken decided to fight back. He soon found out that he wasn't the only one who had encountered a pattern of covering up by the cruise lines, but he needed help.
Or just an individual father of a victim. But maybe if there's other victims out there in the world, maybe we could do something.
So he launched the International Cruise Victims Association. And that was the group that Laurie joined. She started lobbying in Washington, pushing for public hearings into crime aboard cruise ships. Eventually, the pressure worked.
Okay, folks.
Congress called for hearings.
The subcommittee will come to order.
Everyone remotely connected to the industry was called to testify. The victims,
He grabbed my buttocks and ran his hands up and down my legs.
the FBI,
Do you have any sense as to whether or not the cruise line industry is doing a good, decent job of evidence collection at this moment in time?
I can't say with certainty in what percentage of those cases evidence was properly collected at the very beginning.
the United States Coast Guard,
If there's better ways to have processes on ships for people to do things that's safer, it's in their best interest to do that.
and most importantly, the cruise industry was asked to explain itself. Terry Dale, the president of the Cruise Line Industry Association, was called to account.
You don't want to hear a lot of syrupy stuff. Want to know what have we achieved, what can we expect to achieve.
The cruise industry has as its highest priority the protection of our most precious cargo, our passengers. We have heard your concerns. Our industry is working hard to ensure that in the future, if such incidents do occur, each passenger is treated with the necessary compassion, respect, and care.
At the end of the day, many promises from the industry: tighter security, more accountability, more compassion.
I just want to make sure that the things that we are in the process of doing, that we get done. In other words, that we bring closure, said this is done. Now let's move on to the next thing. Done, 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 done.
A stern warning to clean up their act, but so far, no new regulations.
How confident are you that this problem can be fixed?
We're up against an organization with millions of dollars in lobbying efforts, and they don't want to change. And we're saying, hey, the game's up, there's got to be legislation, and we're hoping that's what's going to happen.
But the legislation that Ken Carver is pushing for will only help Americans. So what about the 500,000 Canadians who go on cruise ships every year? What protection do they have? Well, we wanted to speak with Terry Dale about that, but knowing that we were waiting, he slipped out the back door of the hearing room. W5 was there.
Mr. Dale, what steps has been taken to ensure the safety of the Canadian population that's traveling, sir? Would they have to go to the country of the origin of registry, which would be Bahamas? How many investigations have the Bahamian authorities done on your ship, sir?
If the incident happens when the ship is calling on a U.S. port, the FBI would report it. Sorry.
Would you care to do an interview with us to talk about this issue for Canadians?
Unfortunately, I don't have the time.
But Lorie Dishman is not going to let the cruise industry close any doors in her face.
It needs to stop. That it can be happening today to another person, and that it would probably be handled in the same way, because I haven't seen anything that showed me they would do it any different.
To this day, Ken Carver doesn't know what happened to his daughter, accident or foul play.
You're a dad. Your daughter's gone missing. You can't find her.
Right.
That had to rip your heart out.
Still does. Still does. How can anybody, how can a corporation do that to a family?
So the American Congress is warning the cruise lines about what course they chart. They've been told to clean up the problem, or Congress will do it for them. American tourists are a little bit more protected, But what about Canadians?
I think a lot of Canadians and other people that are not U.S. citizens think that when they get on a ship in Miami, they're kind of getting on a little piece of the USA and they'll be protected by the FBI. That couldn't be further from the truth. It just could not be further from the truth.
Mike Erickson is one of the leading attorneys dealing in international law and cruise ships.
You've represented a number of foreign nationals who have been victims of crime on board cruise ships.
That's true.
When they come to you, are they shocked? Are they amazed? Are they angry when they find out what the system holds for them?
A lot of them are. And I've represented Canadians in the past, and they just don't realize until after it happens that they're really not going to get a lot of help from the folks back home.
So, if a Canadian is sexually assaulted on board a cruise ship, what happens? Well, we took that question to the Canadian government. First, we went to the RCMP, but it said there was nothing that it could do. Then we went to the Department of Justice. Justice said it's not our responsibility. So we went to the Department of Foreign Affairs, and they said, yes, indeed, they were responsible, and that any Canadian caught in a situation like that should go to the department's website. Well, we did. Take a look. Here's the webpage that gives some helpful hints. Contact the police. Record all details. Preserve evidence of the attack. Get medical attention. Make arrangements to contact family and friends. What's missing, of course, is any suggestion that the Canadian government could do anything at all to help.
The U.S. has addressed the situation to some degree for its own citizens by passing laws that gives the FBI the right to investigate something that happens to a U.S. citizen on a ship on the high seas. To my knowledge, Canada has not gone there yet. Hopefully
Would it make sense for Canada to do that?
Absolutely, absolutely, because I think it would be useful to the citizens of Canada who become cruise passengers to have that extra degree of protection from their home country.
So you're on your own. Our government will do nothing. The FBI isn't interested. But what will the cruise lines do? Surely they have some interest in protecting their customers. And so W5 went to the two major players in the industry. Carnival Cruise Lines was not interested in talking with us. But Royal Caribbean was. They allowed us to speak with their Vice President of Security, former FBI agent Gary Bald. In Congress, he gave an impressive list of initiatives that he had started.
I intend to focus my testimony on the positive steps we
better crime scene control, more cameras on board ships, even peepholes in the cabin doors, all for better security. We asked Bald what would happen if a Canadian woman was raped on board one of his ships. He said the first thing to do is determine if it's a valid claim.
Some women claim that they were sexually assaulted, and they were not. Others claim they were sexually assaulted, and it is a confusion over whether or not they consented or didn't consent. And then there is a third category, potentially, where someone was sexually assaulted, where it is in dispute as to whether or not they even had sexual relationships. Those are three potential scenarios that we could encounter on board. Regardless of what the type of allegation we receive is, we approach them all the same way, all as if there was a sexual assault and it truly happened.
But that wasn't the way that Lorie Dishman remembers it.
The purser stood up and told me that it sounds as if you need to control your drinking.
Or Jamie Decker on a Carnival ship.
This big, scary security guy comes in, and he's the head of security, and he tells me, like, he's the one who said I had a wild imagination.
It seems to me that most of the time they're looking for reasons to cast the victim in a bad light. Either she consented to the incident in some way, or she was drinking alcohol, and that's to them now a crime. Which, on a cruise ship, alcohol is all over the place.
So why are the cruise lines so skeptical of these reports? Well, maybe it lies in the very definition of sexual assault. It's different things in different countries, but what is it on the high seas?
How do you define sexual assault?
Well, sexual assault is different things to different people. There's a big problem here in the semantics. So if you're looking at comparing our definition for sexual assault with forcible rape, it's not clearly defined because it's different in every jurisdiction. If it's numbers. When you're trying to conglomerate things, you got to have the right definition.
It sounds almost like a Clinton-esque defense. It depends what is.
Bald promised to send us Royal Caribbean's written definition of sexual assault. We're still waiting. Unable to get a precise answer on what defines a sexual assault, we thought at least that we could establish who, in Royal Caribbean's mind, is responsible for investigating sexual assaults on their ships while at sea.
Which law enforcement agency has jurisdiction over a Canadian who's raped in international waters?
If it's on the high seas, it will be reported at the next port of call to the authorities at the next port of call.
So if your next port of call is, say, St. Vincent, it's the St. Vincent police who are in charge of this investigation?
Yes, or the Bahamian officials, if you're in a Bahamian port.
What Gary Bald is saying is that if you're raped on one of his ships, then these are the people you'll have to depend on. The local police. In this case, the Royal Bahamian Constabulary.
Are you saying that there would be no doubt in their mind at all, no question in their mind, that they have complete and utter jurisdiction?
I think so. I think that's correct.
Do they really say that? Yeah. That's ridiculous. That's just absolutely preposterous. Is their position that if a crime happens to, let's just take a Canadian citizen on a cruise ship, and the next port of call is the Bahamas or Jamaica, and it happens on international waters, that the police in the next port of call are going to take jurisdiction? That's ridiculous. It's just preposterous.
Even former security officer Randall Jakes agrees.
Do you invite the local police on?
You can invite them all you want, but I can tell you right now they probably won't respond. They won't take that responsibility because they know it's occurred in international waters, which washes their hands of it, and they don't have to have any involvement in it, which is better for them.
But even if the local police decide to take the case, will there be anything to investigate? Randall Jakes alleges that two things often happen after a crime occurs on a cruise ship. First, the crime scene is either cleaned up or
the crime scene is contaminated from the beginning because already probably 3 people have been in that cabin to where the sexual assault has occurred. It's not like being in America or Canada or the UK and calling for the police in Baltimore, Maryland because your wife was raped in the Hyatt Regency. It's not like that.
And secondly, the offender is often packed off home long before the police arrive.
Typically what happens with a lot of these crew members is that they're immediately debarked in that port, lock, stock, and barrel, and they will be flown back to their country of choice. You get rid of the perpetrator and the problem right there.
I'm wondering if you could respond to these allegations, because on the surface they sound pretty serious. If you're cleaning up crime scenes so the police have got nothing to go on, why?
There are any number of dismissed crew members who might have other motivations in portraying things in other ways. I can't answer those questions.
Bald maintains that Royal Caribbean preserves all crime scenes for authorities. 500,000 Canadians go on cruises every year, as do 9 million Americans. Fortunately, only a small percentage will be sexually assaulted, and yet that could still amount to several hundred people who are being victimized.
Do you feel that the problem is under control?
From the standpoint of numbers, if you're talking about out of control, I think you have to have a frame of reference. Our sexual assault rate is significantly lower than it is shoreside.
Well, remember, not according to evidence presented to Congress, where the rate of sexual assaults on board ships was almost 50% higher than on shore. And besides,
when I hear these statistics from the cruise industry that, the cruise line rate of crime is much less, they say, than the comparable U.S. town or municipality. Show me a typical U.S. town or municipality of comparable size where most of the crime is perpetrated by the city employees.
Employees who know that the odds are in their favor that they'll get away with it, and there's virtually nothing you can do.
What advice would you give to a Canadian who's thinking of going on a cruise so as not to become your next client?
I would say that they ought to watch your program. They ought to listen long and hard to what you got to say about these incidents. It's probably the only advance warning that they're going to get from any source about anything bad that would happen on a cruise ship to them. If they nevertheless, in spite of listening to your program, decide to go ahead and go on a cruise, they should not think of a cruise as a place where they are immune from any kind of criminal activity.